be.
Yeah. And Stas, while you're doing that, and it's always so fun to deal with technology. So thank y'all for your patience. Just to give y'all some scope of where I am while Stas is getting everything ready. So I'm in my office. I literally just finished a patient appointment, and of course, as y'all know, life happens. And so even though I was like, yeah, I'm gonna log on 5-10 minutes early, it's gonna be great, that did not happen because I want to make sure to give all of my patients their my full time and attention whenever I'm working with folks. So I appreciate y'all's indulgence. So thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah. Well, we are good to go. So again, welcome everyone to Pre-Healing, where we're going to focus on mental health, social justice, and difficult community conversations. And so while we hope that this will be a way to handle multiple difficult scenarios, we also want it to specifically not only address the trials in life, but actual courtroom trials and how emotionally charged situations can affect all of us. This is one of many seminars and workshops that we have put on, thanks to funding from the Fund to Advance Racial Equity at the North Texas Community Foundation. So we are very appreciative that they took the initiative and the ability to make sure that we could do things like this. So without further ado, we will get started on the slides. And I will let Dr. Brian Dixon introduce himself. You got to hear a little bit about what he does as a psychiatrist, and then I will be jumping in with questions. And so feel free to give us questions both on Zoom as well as on Facebook, and we will do our best to respond to all of them. And then Dr. Dixon, if you can watch Zoom chat and comments, that would be great, but I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, sounds great. So yes, thank you all so much. This is going to be hopefully a very interactive discussion. It's a very difficult discussion, but we're going to go through it nonetheless. So I am a practicing child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist here in Fort Worth, and I enjoy having opportunities to share my thoughts as well as to support the people around us and around me. So we'll go to the next slide. And thank you, Stas, for driving. So in getting ready for this entire presentation, I want y'all to keep this mantra in mind. By failing to prepare, we prepare to fail. And if there's one thing that we generally do as an American society, is we're very reactive. We always wait until something awful happens, and then we go, oh my God, how do we get ready for this? Well, you know, there are actual things that we can actually prepare for, and there's power in that preparation. And so this lecture is designed to essentially get y'all ready for the emotionally charged cases that are coming down the pike, especially in regards to the murder of Tatiana Jefferson here in Fort Worth. But these ideas can be used throughout any of the legal cases in your life as hard things come up. Next slide, please. And again, thank you, Stas, for running the show. So we'll do the housekeeping basics first. So what to expect from the day, those are your objectives. I won't read those. And then when it comes to the disclaimer, so that's the fine print disclaimer. The big disclaimer I always give you is, I am a psychiatrist, but I'm not your psychiatrist. And so if there are things that come up or things that I say, and you're like, wait a minute, that don't sound right, I'm going to look to you to say, you know what, talk to your qualified mental health professional. If you don't have one of those, your primary care providers can be very instrumental in mental health care, as well as you can Google, but be careful with Dr. Google, because you know how that whole thing goes. So no one knows everything. So when it comes to the law, so in a society, one of the important things about a society is that it is an agreement between those people, a shared set of agreements, so that your communications and your relationships can prosper. And so sometimes when we're trying to get things together, we come up with a charter document to do so, and that's what a constitution is. And so why do amendments exist is because sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we get things way wrong. And if you notice in our constitution, where we were talking about Black folks are 3/5 of a person, that was wrong. And so we go through and we try to do an iterative process. So in other words, we are constantly trying to figure out how to make it better. We'll go to the next slide. And so, thank you. And so one of the things, one of the important parts about the legal system is that you know the players, you know what attorneys do. So attorneys represent clients, and they are truly representing their clients. They may not be speaking for the general quote unquote best interest of society. They are paid and work for their client. And that is something that came up recently with the testimony with the Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson, and she mentioned that I worked for my clients. I wrote the papers based on what my clients' needs were, not on what everybody else was saying, because that's the nature of the relationship between client and attorney-client privilege. Role of judges. Judges read the law and then they act on the law. So if the law is saying something that's not ideal, if the sentencing is not ideal, it's because the law is written that way, and the law is written by the legislature, so Congress people, either Congress or House. And so judges then ensure that the law is being followed. And then the role of mental health professionals and expert witnesses. So sometimes people will call us in as subject matter experts. Like, so we know mental health, and they say, hey, we need an opinion on this, but y'all, it is just an opinion. We are not judges, so that we cannot say, especially when it comes to trials involving kids and divorce, we cannot say necessarily which one is which parent is the best parent. Now, some people do, and that's up to them, but that's generally not our role. And there's a huge line. It's a huge line, but it's a thin line. So it's between mental health and criminology, because the studies have shown that people who are suffering from mental health are no more dangerous than anybody else. And in fact, they are more likely to be the victims of violence. And so when a violent crime or when a crime happens, it is not always related to a mental health diagnosis. And it is a discussion that we don't often have, but we probably need to. And so keeping in mind, as we move through everything, no one knows everything. We have to know the players in a system, know that everybody has a story. There's fairness is a BFD. It's a big freaking deal. Fairness is ingrained in us from a very young age. And in order to make a society work, we have to agree what the terms of fairness are, keeping in mind that there's always three truths, as you hear, my truth, your truth, and then the truth. And then truth happens in context. So we know that there are times when memories falter, even though I'm like, yeah, this is what happened. You watch the video, you go, oh, wait a minute. That's right. I forgot this context, or I forgot this particular thing. And so sometimes that truth happens and we don't need context. Like when we watch the video of the young Black man in the park in New York and the bird watcher. And then other times when you see a video and you see with Ahmaud Arbery, when he was on the premises of that, looking through that house that was being built. And if you only saw that, you would actually miss the context. So sometimes context is helpful. Sometimes it's not. All right. And just keep in mind that everybody has a story and all feelings are justified. However you feel, it's okay to feel that way. And as Black people living in a very kind of racialized society, there's lots of things that have happened to our ancestors. There are lots of things that have been passed down to us from both family and society. You have the right to feel that way. I have lots of white friends right now, and they struggle with understanding certain feelings for Black folks or how they fit into things, and that confusion. That is totally legit. Same thing for men and women. This society was built by men for men. And as a result, especially when it comes to gender parity and pay parity and those sorts of things, it's a big deal. And so all feelings, when you get upset that you're not making as much, when you get upset that you can't get a loan, all of those feelings are valid and justified. And there's intersectionality, which means where those things cross. So if you're gay, if you're straight, if you're abled or not abled, if you are impaired or not, all of these things can come together in very unique ways. And everybody has, all feelings are justified. And so now that we know, no one knows everything, we know the players, we know that everybody has a story, we know that your feelings are justified. you have to remember that laws are flawed because they're made by us. Remember, because we have our own perspectives, right? We have our own feelings, we have our own intersectionality, and but those flawed intersectional people are going to sit down and start writing rules for everybody. And sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we're overly passionate. Sometimes we can be very impressionable. Sometimes we flounder with those unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen, and so we just have to make it up as we go. And those are kind of the inherent flaws to living in a society. The key is that you own your particular role, which is on the next slide, which is beware the individual's shortcomings. So in other words, I'm looking at you are the person that helps build the laws. Because remember, you elect the electors who write the laws. And so if you yourself are using all or nothing thinking, it's very much that black and white, like, oh my God, all those people are bad, or only my people are good, or only people who believe what I believe are worthy. That's a problem, okay? A huge problem. Same thing with confirmation bias. It's when, and that can come in lots of different ways, when information comes in that confirms what you thought was happening, and then you disregard other bits of data, that's a problem. You can see that in the Omicron virus. You can see that with the January 6th insurrection. There are certain people who will go, wow, some of this information makes sense. And then I'm just going to disregard the rest. And then projection, which is, I always get this one confused, but it's basically when you put onto others the feelings that you have. So instead of, I feel uncomfortable with a certain thing, I say, I'm not yelling, you're yelling. And you're like, wait a minute, no, I'm not really yelling. Well, if you're using those mechanisms, if you're using those coping skills as a person, as an individual, you can imagine how difficult it's going to be to create a society if you have the all or nothing thinking, the confirmation bias, or you're projecting your feelings onto other people. And so beware your individual shortcomings. And that ties directly into beware the group shortcomings. So y'all, when we get into groups, also known as echo chambers or groupthink or mob mentality, things can foster even things that we know are not correct. We tend to start to go, wait a minute, if all these 10 people around me are saying this, then it must be true. And that is not how it works at all. And it can be very, very dangerous. So you have your individual shortcomings overlaid over the top of the group shortcomings, and that can be very, very problematic. Okay. So one of the things we need to do, and I'll let you go to the next slide, is we need to begin the process of kind of digging out of things. We need to start to admit when we're wrong, or when we're cheating, or when we're overcorrecting, right? So we know when we said in the 80s, we want a war on drugs, right? We now realize, wait a minute, that was wrong, because disproportionately we were locking Black folks into jail. We were giving them longer sentences. The drug laws were not being fair at all. Again, a good idea in theory. As an individual, a good idea, don't use drugs. As a group, hey, don't use drugs because it affects everybody, but we sometimes overcorrect when we give it a label and then we push towards that. Same thing with gerrymandering, which both parties do it, but it's that idea that you take a group of people and you start drawing lines to dilute certain people's power in those things. Well, that can be very problematic to our individual sense of fairness. And so all of those things come in. So keeping all of those things in mind, so including nobody knows everything, know your players, know who's in the legal system, keeping in mind that the legal system is made by human beings, and that everybody has a story, and that the law is flawed because we are inherently flawed, and that when we do things individually or in groups, those things can be flawed, and that our intentions can sometimes be wrong. Keeping all of those things in mind, how do we start to pre-heal? How do we start to prepare and plan for what's coming? Because we know what is coming. We know that there is a trial coming. We know that there is going to be lawyers representing Aaron Dean. and they're going to be saying whatever they say. And then there are going to be lawyers who say things about Tatiana Jefferson, and they're going to say whatever they say. And there's going to be a judge who's sitting up there listening to this, and there's going to be a jury who's listening to this. We know this is coming. And so what is pre-healing? Pre-healing are the actionable items to lessen the emotionally intense social justice conversations that must happen between 2022 Americans. And we specifically put this on the slide, 2022, because if you're watching this video 10 years from now, it may actually be different. Because context matters. There may be new laws. We may have had a social justice revolution right by then, and this will be arbitrary and moot, which would be awesome. But for right now, we're trying to get ready for the next big thing. So what is pre-healing? That's what pre-healing is. So let's go through some of those actionable items. So first of all, listen asynchronously. So nothing good happens in anger. And it's one of the reasons why Stas and I, anytime we're working with patients and they're getting all riled up, we tell them, do not go home and make any big decisions. Take a day off, go sleep, go breathe, go for a walk, because that's all synchronous decision making. So what we're going to ask y'all as part of pre-healing is when you hear something, we want you to not connect it to any specific event or time. Listen to it and then mull it over. Listen asynchronously, out of time. Okay, so that's the first thing I want you to do. Secondly, I want you to immerse yourself in something different. So go and find other people of other mindsets. If you are around lots of folks who say that this particular officer is bad and evil, go spend time around people who don't feel that way. Because remember, he has a family. And do it without judgment. You just listen. If we listened more than we talked, I think we'd be a much better society. And so immerse yourself with other people of different backgrounds, abilities, races, because they will always teach you the exception. I have learned this lesson time and time again. When I go into something, I'm thinking, I know what I'm going to feel. And then I listen to other people's perspective, and it's super, super helpful to shortcut my confirmation bias. Okay. So listen asynchronously, immerse yourself in something different. Avoid the emotional accelerant. So caffeine, Red Bulls, and Four Locos, which I don't know exist anymore, but it's fun to poke fun at them. Alcohol. So alcohol can disinhibit people. So in other words, it makes it more likely for you to be speaking out of turn. That's kind of what truth serum is. It's a version. It hits a part of your brain that alcohol hits. Benzodiazepine, same thing. Illicit substances. So, please try not to get high and do all that stuff while the trial is going on, and wax eloquently. And then be mindful of sugar, because we just all need to be mindful of sugar. And so all of those things kind of accelerate your thinking, or they can short circuit your good intention. So listen asynchronously, immerse yourself in someone different, around other different people. Avoid those emotional accelerants. We want you to trust but verify. So whatever you see, even if it sounds like it's right, I want you to scroll the whole entire thing, whatever it is, click whatever links to go and find it. If there is no link, especially on Twitter, because some people don't put links and they're just saying stuff, take it with a grain of salt. Just because it sounds good and it's a great pitch or whatever does not mean that it is true. You have got to do your homework. Social media companies are lazy. They want your eyeballs. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about the veracity of the statement. They want you to click and buy things. So be very, very mindful to trust and verify. Trust but verify. Next up, seek the middle. So I want you to think of a pendulum. You seek the middle, you can go out to either side, but the goal is to come back to the middle. So find those moderate friends, those people who are, very even keel. When you hear something outrageous, oh my God, did that happen? Talk to your moderate friends first, and then you can go talk to your extreme friends who want to, burn everything down and, hurt people. And then you come back to your moderate friends, and that'll be a way that you can kind of safely manage your understanding of whatever the situation is, because actually most people are actually pretty moderate, are in the middle. And I say that as a psychiatrist working with people of all backgrounds. Most folks want safety, love, and security, right? So the extremes are actually not very common. All right. After you sought the middle, we want you to advocate for fairness and transparency. So remember how when we started the lecture, we talked about the importance of no one knows everything, know the players, everyone has a story. As part of everyone has a story, fairness is a BFD. It's a big freaking deal. And so we want you to advocate for that fairness and that transparency. We want you to step up and say, you know what? Even though I don't like this, the most fair thing in this situation would be X, Y, and Z, or the most transparent thing to be would be X, Y, and Z, because democracy dies in darkness is one of the a newspaper's saying, and that true is partly true. If you are hiding things, that can be very problematic. And then last but not least, remember that attention is currency. So whatever you give your attention to, whatever you're scrolling and clicking on, that is literal currency. Social media companies and other people are using that to grab your eyeballs. Okay, so the more you scroll, the more data you're giving to whoever you're giving to, and literally they can watch you on their website, how fast you scroll, what you read over, all of those things. And so they then will feed you more of what you hover over, or what you click on, or what you hesitate over. So be very mindful that your attention is currency, and I want you to hold that currency back. You don't have to spend all your currency. In fact, you can just turn your phone off and not give anybody your currency attention for that day. And generally, you're going to be a much better person for it. And remember, this is all pre-healing, knowing before the trial is coming. Watch what you're doing with your attention. Make sure you're right now, advocating for fairness and transparency. Make sure right now you're seeking out your middle friends before you go to the friends on the edges. Right now, trust but verify. So when you read something about the trial, trust that it's true, but then go and verify it. Right now, make sure that you are eating right, exercising, avoiding excessive alcohol. Right now, you immerse yourself in different mindsets, surround yourself with people who think differently and have a different life experience. And then right now, listen asynchronously. Now, we're glad you are currently listening synchronously, because you're listening to us on a live Facebook, which is kind of awesome. But this is for those folks who are listening asynchronously, you're watching later on, you can take notes, you can ask questions, take time to literally let it sink in, because what's coming during this trial with our high emotions, and this is the time when if you're not careful, you'll start to try to take those shortcuts, and anger can get the best of you. So Stas, we'll go to the next slide.
And while I pull that up, one of the things I was going to say about the attention is currency is that be aware of what you click on, and be mindful about, again, find positive influences, different opinions, and follow those, because it all works with an algorithm, and it all works based on what you click and talk about and all of those things. So you can also prepare by being mindful and finding positive influences that aren't going to focus on all the things that are hard in the world.
Yep, correct. And remember how we started. So this is one of the, we repeat this slide because it is the most important slide of the whole entire thing. By failing to prepare, you prepare to fail. I do not want to see Fort Worth or any city going through riots. Peaceful protest? Absolutely. I love peaceful protest because it means that you're exercising your constitutional right. You're exercising your personal right. You are investing your time and your body to go out and find connection with other like-minded individuals. That can be very, very healing. That can be very, very powerful and very empowering. But what is not healing or empowering is screaming and yelling and arguing about points that some of which may or may not be applicable to the situation. And so you have to prepare before this happens. Seek out those people, walk through all of those pre-healing steps that we mentioned. And of course, there are lots more than the ones that we listed. We just wanted to try to hit the high points, and also to make sure that we kept the presentation short enough so that we can have all your questions and we can continue to grow and mature this particular presentation, because we will be having it again. I will finish up with a part of a poem. This is part of a song that I sang 3 or 4 years ago, but I think it's an important poem. It says, "Peace is not a silent state that comes upon us from within. Peace is not a force like rain that comes unbidden from above. Peace is fire. Peace is passion, a certain courage, a heart of iron. Peace is not something that's just going to fall from the sky. And oftentimes we think that, oh, well, if nothing's happening, then we're in peacetime. And that's not how I think of peace. I think of peace as something that you actively work on. Pre-healing is active work. It is you actively stepping outside your comfort zone, talking to people across the aisle. It's you stepping outside of your comfort zone, talking to people with different life experience. It is you taking the time to learn what lawyers do. It is you learning the details of the case. It is you voting. It is you registering to vote. It is you canvassing and walking neighborhoods and talking to people. Peace is fire. You have to have a passion for peace. And if you have that passion, it will show up in everything that you do. Okay. So the last slide is, so if you want more information, so I feel blessed to be on the board of ACFS. We provide lots of therapy to lots of people all across the state. And my website is a place where you can go to learn more about me and what I'm doing. I have a blog and all that stuff. So if you want to read all that, feel free. With that, I am open for questions. So, Stas, I think, is that the last slide?
That is the last slide. And I was going to say, we have the questions open on Facebook. I know it's going to be a little bit delayed, so make sure you send those in sooner rather than later. There's no bad question. And then those that are here on Zoom with us, feel free to put them as a chat or a question answer. All of those things are open. While we wait for some of the questions to come in, some of the things that came to mind as you were speaking is when we look at finding more balanced viewpoints. There was a movie, kind of a conspiracy movie about zombies and fun things like that. But one of the things they talked about is the characters asked, how did you know to even think about this, idea that seemed absurd? And they said that one of the things they had learned was that if 10 people in the room are all saying the same exact thing, that it is the responsibility of at least one of them to strongly disagree, so that we challenge all viewpoints and make sure that we are including and thinking about what are we missing by not thinking through this? What are we missing by not hearing the opposite and truly giving it thought? So that was just one of the things that popped up for me.
Yep, I agree. And there's lots of iterations, there's lots of variations on that particular topic. The key thing is, if you're not hearing any dissension, if you're not hearing a different voice, then you might be in an echo chamber. You might be in a room where everybody's saying the same thing, and you run a huge risk of confirmation bias. You run a huge risk of only thinking your viewpoint is the only viewpoint. And honestly, like, especially on Twitter, that comes with the territory. You only follow people that generally say what you say, or say it in a style that you like it. And so as you scroll, even though you have thousands of people on your Twitter, you'll start to go, yeah, the world only sees me. I'm seeing 1,000 different people and they all speak my language. Well, there's still 8 billion other folks essentially that aren't on Twitter that don't feel your way. And so it's a very sneaky thing. And Stas, actually, if you'll let me share my screen really quickly.
Yes, let me stop sharing here.
Excellent. And then you have to enable me to share my screen.
Oh, more technology. Gosh.
Okay. And so, yeah, perfect. I'm a host now. Look at me. Yay. So I'm going to share this. Please don't look at all my open tabs because it's a hot mess. But anyway, this is lots of y'all have seen this particular infographic floating through the internet. Most times the colors are blue and red, but I decided not to do that because I don't want nobody to get mad at me. And so we're going with green and yellow. But essentially, this part, so you have 50% of the precincts, 60% green and yellow. Well, ideally, if you want to have equal representation in each district, you could do it that way. But there are ways, and this is what gerrymandering is considered. There are ways of moving the lines around to get the same 5 districts, but you can get different results. And like I said, lots of people, I'll stop sharing, gerrymandering or moving those lines around that is something that we choose to do. So that's what's happening right now with like a lot of the voting maps in Georgia, voting maps in Texas, and that sort of thing. And yes, I hear it all the time. Well, the Democrats did it, or well, the Republicans did it, and so we're going to do it too. I mean, none of that. It doesn't make it right. And the key to you, because again, I'm not talking. I don't need the general population to pre-heal. I need you to pre-heal, and I need you to know that these are the times. Stuff like this is when we first have to acknowledge that we individually are letting this happen. We are allowing this kind of cheating or overreacting or overcorrecting to occur, and so now it's on us to go. You know what, guys? Regardless of who's in power, if it's my party or not, let's not do that. Let's be more fair, because remember, fairness is a BFD. It is innate in us as humans, and especially as Americans. And so we really want y'all to be conscious of that before we get into this trial.
Now, some other questions that have come up in some kind of other commentary in other places has been, how do you find the balance between what you recognize as your core beliefs and wanting to maybe encourage those things in your family and in your kids, versus the fear of, well, if I educate about this completely opposite viewpoint, I'm going to lose my kid to that viewpoint, and I won't have any impact or influence. What would you suggest for how parents can find the balance between, teaching these skills of balanced perspectives to their kids as well?
Yeah, it's tough. So the parent-child dynamic. Dynamic is a fancy way of saying the relation between the two, right? So, and how they relate to each other. So the parent-child dynamic is really tough because there's a power differential, and there's a connection differential. It's different than the parent child friend dynamic. So in other words, the friends of your children will totally listen to you. They'll totally believe you. They will totally do all sorts of stuff. And so there's a unique overlay. And so the key, in my opinion, is that the parent give their kids some wayfinding. They say, all right, as a society, or this is a social value, blah, 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 blah. Now in my house, blah, 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 right? So those two things can live side by side. I want you to go out and you speak your piece in the social setting. I want you to feel comfortable. That is your right to speak up. Now, when we're at the dinner table, however, no, I need you to finish eating, and you can get up and go clean up the kitchen, right? And so like wayfinding, signposting is I think what they call it. You let the kiddo know, you let your child know where you're coming from, so that then there's no ambiguity, there's no misunderstanding. That's how I would do it. And then use those awesome I statements, right? I feel this way, right? So signpost for them, hey, this is coming up. Here's what's happening. This is how I feel about it. Now, here's my expectation of you as my child. And that's how I would recommend it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the gerrymandering, one of the things that, I wonder about, or don't know the exact answer about, is where's also the balance between showing that you are redrawing lines so that groups that typically have been underrepresented can have a voice, versus, how do you find the balanced perspective, or is that wrong to be, creating extra areas? Because I know that is a big thing in the city of Fort Worth right now.
Yeah, well, this is where I have to give a shout out to the city of Fort Worth, because again, we can talk really big conceptual stuff, because there are places going on throughout the country where it is clearly gerrymandering, because they are taking predominantly certain colored areas, and then they're moving people around, and you can just clearly see it. I think the way that you combat that is what the Fort Worth City Council just did. So I have to give them credit. They did a very kind of open redistricting process, so people could give their input the entire way. And yes, nobody's going to be happy with everything, but it looks like they found a way to add additional seats and do it in a very transparent and public way. And I think that's the best method that you can do in a civil society, because at the end of the day, a society is just a whole bunch of individuals who are all giving up a little power and a little bit of their fairness so that we can have a communal power and a communal fairness. And so if you do it out in the open, I think that's as good as you can get.
Excellent. And it sounds like that also goes to the idea of how to immerse yourself in different and getting different viewpoints, because they're having this open and transparent conversation, so that everyone can share those things to make it a fair balance.
Absolutely. And it's really funny. The easier answer is to just do stuff by yourself. And that's a me thing. Like there are certain times where I'm just like, oh my God, I can't, I'll just do it myself, and I'll just go and, even if it's affecting 10 other people, I'll just do it myself. And I'm like, wait a minute. In a social, in a society, we have to fight that inner urge to just get things done on our own. We have to go and say, all right, guys, what do we do? What do y'all want to do as a collective? Be that as a neighborhood association, be that as a civic group, be that as a chamber of commerce, right? We have to work collectively. It is a lot slower. It's way more painful because I love people, but people are going to people because people all the time, right? And so, but that's the power of getting buy-in from multiple people and multiple groups as a society, as we can build a better society when we're being inclusive about it.
Excellent. Now, kind of in the idea of being inclusive and getting those multiple perspectives, I know you mentioned trust but verify. How do we know where to verify and what is the right source if it feels like it's so opposite all over the place?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, Stas, this is, again, I wouldn't say anything keeps me up at night because I tend to sleep pretty well. But this bugs me because who is the arbiter of truth? Who is the person or the company or the social structure that is supposed to verify all the information to make sure it's right? Honestly, this is where I say, public education and just education in general comes in, because there's certain things that we know for a fact. Water is wet. You have there's a constitution. You have the right to vote, unless there's some rule or law that abridges that. If you hear something fanciful and unusual, go and look that up. But you get most of your understanding of how a society works from your family to start with, and then when you get out into the rest of the world. And so, yeah, if it sounds unusual, it probably is, and that's when you just start. You can use your favorite search engine, but one of the great things is there is a chat board for everything, and quite a few people on chat boards. Some of them are dangerous. So like 4chan is bad. Don't ever look at that. It's a horrible cesspool of awfulness. But like Twitter, there are times when it is a very useful tool to get different perspectives. And so, yeah, there's no one good way. And as soon as we would say there's one good way of verifying data, that data would be corrupted and be a hot mess. And so this is where I'm going to look to each citizen, each person to say, do your best. And then the good thing about licensed professionals, so LCSWs, LPCs, psychologists, psychiatrists, LMFTs, PsyDs, PhDs, we have a code of ethics and a code of conduct. And so even if it's not a therapy thing, you can probably still run it by whoever. Hey, should I be eating powdered donuts to treat COVID? Well, I mean, powdered donuts taste amazing, but they ain't gonna do nothing for your infection. So, so talking to an expert can be very, very helpful. And go powdered donuts.
Oh, the funny thing is I'm not a fan. I'm so sorry.
Oh, look at the time. All right, guys, it was great to see you. Yeah.
So again, keep sending those questions in. This is great. One of the other questions, and I'm trying to pull it back up here again. I'm so sorry. Oh, well, one of the things I was going to mention is you were talking about going and seeing, a professional to get a second opinion. Do that to get multiple opinions, not just one opinion, but multiple, because in the same way we talked about how law flaws exist because they're made by humans, and so we have flawed thinking and we can be passionate and impressionable, we can also interpret the same thing two different ways. So when we read the best donut ever, he's interpreting powdered donuts and I'm totally doing chocolate and sprinkles. We're going to read that and picture something completely different based on our experiences, likes, dislikes. So get multiple opinions, and then you'll see chocolate with sprinkles is the best. But
oh my God,
apart from that, one of the other questions is, when you mention listen asynchronously and not to respond immediately or out of anger, what happens when you're seeing these images and you're hearing these stories and you identify with those that um, have been either murdered, killed, mistreated, abused, whatever the situation may be? How do you rein in those emotions to something that feels so palpable, to be able to hear what seems like an incredulous opposite perspective, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, it's super hard. I don't know that there's one good answer for it. What I'm hoping, so what I'm hoping will happen by listening asynchronously is you get rid of the urge to immediately respond. Because I think that's where some of the dangerous hiccups happen. So, for example, listening to the confirmation hearings, when I was watching it live, I would hear something and I would go, "Oh my gosh, that is totally taken out of context," and now I'm really pissed off, and now I feel like I need to do something and let me right. Whereas I said no, let me listen asynchronously. So I would watch clips later on, and I would go, yeah, that's totally taken out of context, but it's already happened. I can't change anything. I can add to the discourse that it is now. And I think that is a more kind of powerful way of managing your response, because we're all creatures of we're passionate people, especially um, as mental health folks. I mean, we're passionate about mental health, and we're passionate about fairness and equality and equity. And so we as a group tend to, let's fix it and fix it now. And so I'm going to say, when it comes to legal cases, because the legal cases are all crafted. Lawyers spend a lot of time crafting a narrative and crafting a strategy. And then we're just watching it play out. And so if we keep in mind that we don't have to respond in the moment, because they're going to do what they do anyway. Like, we can't like jump into the hearing and tell them to stop, because that's what they're literally paid to do, is to to be able to get their client off or through or whatever they're doing. We just have to be very thoughtful about that. And it's gonna happen with this trial. You're gonna hear stuff about this officer. And again, I don't know him. That's my disclaimer. I don't know him. I don't know anything about him, but the lawyers are going to do what they are paid to do. And yes, you're going to have a visceral reaction. And so if you know that's you, watch it asynchronously, and then try to reach out to people, including in law enforcement, learn more about what they're doing and how they feel, because I think it'll make us just a more informed public when these hard things start to happen.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Now, in terms of the process of pre-healing and continuing to heal, what happens if verdicts come back and we've done our research, we've tried to listen, and the conclusion they come to is completely opposite from what we think is fair and valid and transparent and justified? How do we handle that?
Yeah. So part of, remember how I mentioned, as part of being in society, we take a piece of our fairness from our value and we put it into the collective pool. And we take a piece of our power and put it into the collective pool. That is shared governance, that is shared power, that is shared fairness. And if that pool drains, or if it shifts to one side and away from you, it's not that it's gone forever. It just means it is gone for this one particular thing. So I would say it's not the end of the world. The key is you then work around the pool of all the other folks from all sides to try to get them to bring more balance. And that's where, canvassing, voting in the people that you think share your values, teaching the next generation about civics and how to have a critical debate and a critical conversation. All of those things are things that you can do to prep for the next time, because there will be a next time, right? So I don't want any other lives to be lost innocently to anybody, but it's going to happen again. And over the last, 3 or 4 years, especially when it comes to kind of the racial trauma of seeing people die, we've seen a lot, and it happened again and again and again. And it's probably still even happening now. We just don't see it. And so preparing to, we have to prepare to be successful. If we don't prepare now, we're going to keep being surprised at these when these particular situations happen.
Yeah. Now, what happens if we've done our work to pre-heal and we're doing the best we can to implement all the suggestions of really how to have these difficult conversations, and we interact with others who don't see anything wrong with their one-sided view and don't want to listen? and are very strongly raising their viewpoints, which can be really hard when it's like, well, hey, I'm trying to be fair and balanced and justified. And where's the consideration and fairness in reverse? How do we handle that when it's not balanced in that way?
That's an excellent question. So I think it all depends on the setting. So most workplaces, I wouldn't say that they have rules against talking about these things, but most workplaces are like, please just concentrate on your work. And so I'm going to say, at the workplace, if you feel like it's out of turn, then talk to whoever's in charge of the culture of the environment, so that you don't have to hear that if that bothers you. If you're not in the workplace, just remove yourself. Go for a walk, get off that social media. Don't feel the need to respond to every tweet or Facebook post. If you know it's a family member, especially on Facebook or other social media, you can mute them or block them, or just delete the app for a week and come back when the emotions aren't so high. The key is just peace is something that you have to cultivate. You have to go ahead and prepare the ground now so that you can reap the peace later when times get tough.
Yeah. I think one of the other things to remember is that while this is pre-healing and it's doing the work, a lot of times we hear these analogies, maybe in therapy or videos or books or whatever, that talk about being like a tree, and when I think of trees, although I'm sure my family members would laugh since I'm trying to grow some now, but for the most part, we see them in parks, we see them in front lawns. It's planted, it's been there who knows how many years. We don't really think about it. Some people may water it, but that may be the extent, but it's not an everyday out there actively working on it. Whereas if we think of, we are not like a tree where we get planted, we get to this magical level and then we're done. It's more like a house. Like we may lay the foundation, especially in Texas. Y'all know we have to be watering around the foundation. If you don't know that, go look it up, because it'll shift, it'll crack, and then we get bigger problems. And so if we think about pre-healing as being like prepping the foundation, so before we even have this house and the walls go up, we got to do it right. And we have to have the plans and we have to have it architectured. And this is how we can do it and do it well. But that doesn't mean we get to a magical place and the job is done. It's constantly doing the work, because we're going to see these cases that question, our faith in humanity and our faith in others to do the right thing, and really question, like, are we even doing the right thing to be kind and to listen to other viewpoints if we're not being listened to back? And I think that's where we have to remember this is an active process and it's slow for results. It's not a microwave button fix. And so when we take the time to do the work and we lay the foundation right, and we are constantly addressing it, and we're constantly teaching the same way that hopefully we teach our kids, here's how you care for a house, how you care for your daily responsibilities, how you do all these things. We do that with our values and with listening as well. And we impart that so that, again, it may be changed slower than we want to see, but that's part of how we pre-heal and continue to heal our communities.
1,000,000%. Yeah. Immediate gratification is something that we're going to have to fight against. And I know Stas's next question is, so then what do you do when your side wins? Right. So when you go into a trial with your preconceived notion and the outcome that you're hoping for happens, what do you do? And the key is, I would say, so nobody likes a spoil sport? Is that how you say it? A poor sport.
Oh, I don't know. Yes, poor sport.
Yeah, there you go. And just know that whether or not, because I don't know if you as a person will have anything personally invested in any particular trial, but know that some other people do. And so if the verdict of a trial comes out in your favor, don't feel the need to voice that. Let people have their time to mourn or grieve or do whatever they're going to do, because to them, losing or not having the outcome that they wanted, it's hard, and giving them time and space to manage that is really important. And ideally, they did their pre-healing, but then they just need to do their healing after it happens. And then once they have, gotten some days under their belt to kind of adjust to the new normal, then you can reach out to them. Hey, what do you need? How can I help? Yeah, so that's what I would say to that. Just be very mindful that there are other people who don't share your enthusiasm. It doesn't make them wrong or you wrong or anything like that. Let's not think in terms of right and wrong. Let's think in terms of just hurt and life experience, right? So they need to process it. Give them time to process that hurt or whatever that feeling is that they have, because they are normal. And remember, like I said, all feelings are justified.
Yes. So if you win, stay away from those emotional accelerants that we talked about earlier. If you lose, stay away from the emotional accelerants. It does not help to go either way. I think it's one of those remembering that, you know, we have different viewpoints and we're coming about it from different experiences. And ultimately, when these trials happen, it's usually because of hard events that really have a horrible ripple effect for multiple people that care about both sides that are involved in this. And while there is kind of a winner or a losing side that are chosen in cases, there's still loss on both sides, whether you
absolutely. Yep.
So, well, perfect. Well, I know we are in the last couple minutes, so if anyone has not gotten their question in, let us know. But ultimately, we will be sending out a recap. So those that are getting CEU credits, we'll send you, well, to everyone, we will send you a questionnaire so that you can let us know, how did we do? What can we improve on? So everyone who signed up through Eventbrite will get that. And we'll share the link in the event page on Facebook if you're joining us that way. So definitely check in there, give us your feedback, what you would want to hear more of. We hope that we can start pre-healing as a series, because again, this is active, regular work. It's not a one and done. It's not an instant reaction. And I think being able to see how can we pre-heal and then continue to advocate, you know, for what we believe to be fair and justified, and ensuring that all voices have a voice, all individuals are heard, and that we get balanced perspectives and support one another in that. So please fill it out. This will be recorded, and so you can check it out later, either on Facebook, on YouTube, etc. But we do appreciate the time and letting us come speak to you. So,
Thanks, y'all.